Hi, this is James Lecesne. Come see me at the Bay Street Theater. I'll be performing my solo show, The Absolute Brightness of Leonard Pelkey. And I'm here talking with Dave Lefkowitz at Dave's Gone By at UNC Radio.
Welcome back to Dave's Gone By on this fine Saturday morning. With us is an actor, a writer, a director. He's really wearing many, many hats, and he wears them all pretty darn well. You might have seen him off-Broadway this past season in the acclaimed solo show, The Absolute Brightness of Leonard Pelkey. Wait, you didn't see it? You didn't get to see it? Oh, well, guess what? You have another chance, because between July 18th and July 24th, you can go out to the Bay Street Theater in East Hampton and see James Lecesne in his award-nominated and also award-winning show, The Absolute Brightness of Leonard Pelkey. He's also done Word of Mouth off-Broadway back in 1995 that won a Drama Desk Award, and he's made films. His short film, Trevor, won the Oscar, so we're going to ask him about that too. Please welcome to the Daverhood, James Lecesne.
I like the Daverhood. That's so good.
Well, thank you.
I'm so happy to be here.
Well, you're making Lecesne with us. Sorry about that. Yeah, I know. So, hasn't been the best couple of weeks for Duncan Sheik, the musician, the composer, because his show American Psycho just did not become a hit on Broadway. But I didn't realize he did the music.
But it was on Broadway. Let's not forget that it was. And not only that, he had another show on Broadway this season, the revival of Spring Awakening, which was done by the brilliant Deaf West company. So they reimagined. So he had two shows on Broadway this season.
Oh yeah, no, that was
more than most people get.
Yeah.
in their lifetime.
I didn't get to see American Psycho, but I did see Spring Awakening. It was magnificent.
Doing his work, he's doing his work, and I think for all of us who do our work, you do your work and you hope for the best. Sometimes it gets out there and runs a long time, and sometimes not so much. But you never know where the work is going to go.
As a playwright and actor myself, I know the feeling. But the reason I bring up Duncan Sheik, it's not out of the blue, folks, is because he did the music for your solo show for Leonard Pelkey. So how did you end up collaborating with him on that?
Well, I performed the show, maybe 10 minutes of it at an event 2 years ago, and he was in the audience, and he came up to me afterwards. I mean, we know each other, but he came up to me and he said, I'm going to write some music for this piece. And I was like, well, it's not a musical. It's just a solo show. And he said, yeah, but you need music.
Oh.
So he very kindly, he just got excited about it. And he got excited about the story and what I was doing, and basically offered his services, which was an amazing thing, and created really the ambiance of the show, which is this sort of mystery noir story about a missing boy. So he did a wonderful thing, and I'm always grateful to him.
Unfortunately, I've not been able to see Leonard Pelkey, but I assume the music works.
Well, you're going to have a chance.
If I fly out to Bay Street, yeah, I'm a few thousand miles away. But actually, I would love to. I'm sorry. It's one of the shows I am sorry that I missed this past season. I also missed it, unfortunately. We were both in the same festival less than a year ago, back in October. We were both in the
United Solo Festival, yeah?
Yeah, I was doing Miracle of Long John's, and you took the award for, what was the technical thing of your award? What was it called? The best something?
Best solo.
Overall, was it, or best solo? What was it?
I don't know what the actual wording was.
Good Lord, you win an award, and you don't even, I can name down to the punctuation of the award I won. I took it for best nonfiction.
I think it was for best solo show. I mean,
yeah.
Especially in a solo festival, that seems what it was.
Yeah, best solo show. That's what I was wondering. It was best solo show. I took best nonfiction script or something like that. No, not or something like that. That's verbatim. Was pretty proud of that, but sorry that I did not get to see yours.
Oh, you know what it was? It was the 2015 Special Award.
Oh.
That's what it was. The Special Award.
Okay.
Which, of course, is complicated because everybody's special.
Well, Leonard Pelkey is kind of a special child in a way. Can you tell us a little more about that character?
The story is about a 14-year-old boy named Leonard Pelkey who disappears from a small New Jersey town, and I play all the people in the town who are trying to figure out what happened to him and also how he impacted their life. Leonard is he's special in the sense that he's very much himself, and he's like a lot of kids these days who are really teenager is to figure out who you are and to try new things. But he tends to be a little bit flamboyant.
Okay.
In a town that is, well, probably not so used to his type of flamboyance.
Well, is he specifically gay, or you don't get it because he's 14 or 13?
Well, I think that he probably will grow up to be gay, but at 14, I don't think he even thinks of himself in that way yet,
No, I mean, by 14, I knew I was determinately heterosexual. By the time I was 11, I kind of knew, oh, okay, I like those parts. So, by 14, I figure boys know, but maybe some don't.
I think it's really a case-by-case thing, and I think it's less about the fact that he's gay, which he probably is, than is that he's just sort of flamboyantly himself.
And a bad thing happens to him. We're not going to say what, but he does disappear.
Well, he disappears, for one thing, and that really sets the mystery of the play in motion. They have to figure out what happened to him and where he went.
Was Leonard Pelkey a new creation, or you did a novel and then a short novel and how did it come about?
In 2008, I wrote a young adult novel called Absolute Brightness, which is basically the same story, but it's told from the point of view of a 16-year-old girl in the town, who is actually one of the characters in the play. So I just felt like I wanted to talk to an adult audience about what are we doing about this generation of kids who are out there being themselves. How do we take care of them? How do we protect them? And how do we alert them to the dangers of being flamboyantly themselves and authentically themselves, and at the same time really encourage them? So that's how it came about. I just decided that I would tell the story from a different point of view, and the play is told from the point of view of a detective who's really leading the investigation.
Now, you play all these different characters in this 80-something minute show. When you're creating or trying to act these characters that you've written, is there one particular trait that you sort of lay on them, and that way the audience knows immediately, oh, okay, he's playing that now? How do you go from character to character that way?
They're very real people to me. Sort of like when you're, as a playwright, you're trying to create a human being, right? You're trying to create a fully embodied human being that people will relate to, but also they'll recognize as somebody that they could know, right? So part of that is just the craft of writing, is that you just put it down on paper, and then trying to figure out how to get it into your body is like the next step, right? But to me, they're so real. I just think of them as like these real people that I'm sharing with the audience, and I have to be able to believe that they're real so that I can transform into them.
Now, when you were creating the play, was it initially like 2.5 hours long, and you had it like 2:15, 2 hours, hour 45 minutes? No, it sprang basically in the hour-and-a-half format?
Well, I've done a number of these solo shows over the course of my career, and you kind of know what the capacity for an audience to be able to stick with one person is, right? And my own sense is that you really can't go over like an hour and 17 minutes. It's like that's the absolute maximum that you can keep people with you. So I built the piece with that in mind, and I cut away some extra stuff that seemed like it wasn't in keeping with the story and was sort of holding the story back, and it came out to about a trim 80 minutes.
Rolling back on your career, your first show, I should say, that brought you notoriety, that was done in a big way off Broadway, was Word of Mouth, going back about 20 years now. How did you get to that point, from being like, a kid who might have been interested in theater to getting there?
And there would be where?
Well, doing Word of Mouth off Broadway, having it being seen by the Drama Desk and winning the Drama Desk Award, and essentially starting your career.
Yeah, my, quote, career started a long time before that, because when I first came to New York, I was in the original production of a play called Cloud 9. Was that
off Broadway, the Carol Churchill play?
Yeah, that was off Broadway, and that was a long time ago. And then, I played a 5-year-old girl and a black African manservant, neither of which I am. And
really? Oh my gosh, your picture! You need to change your headshot. Just kidding. Yeah.
And what what I do and how I transform into these other characters, there isn't a whole lot of, they're not calling for that a lot. So I decided that around then, when I first started, that I would write and perform my own shows. I was really inspired by people like Ruth Draper, who was a monologist or a monologist from like the 1940s, and I'd heard some recordings of hers. Also, Lily Tomlin was an early influence of mine, and I'd seen these people doing solo shows, and I thought, well, that's what I wanted to do. So the first show I did was actually called One Man Band, and I did it off-Broadway. Vanessa Williams, former Miss America, and...
Had she already been the Miss America by then, or what? That was before the whole...
So she had been Miss America, and she was here in New York, starting out her career as a singer, and I asked her if she wanted to be a backup singer, and she said yes. So it put me on the map in that sense, because she was in the show, but also the show did really well. And then I traveled around the country with that show for years and years. Then I wrote some other shows, and then I wrote Word of Mouth in 95, 94.
Yeah.
And Mike Nichols produced it off-Broadway, and Eve Ensler, who wrote the Vagina monologue,
sure.
She directed it.
How did you get them on board? How did you get to Mike Nichols?
I was doing the show in a little theater downtown, and he came one night. Somebody told him about it. It was sort of a little bit of a hit in this tiny little theater downtown that doesn't exist anymore.
Huh.
And he came to see the show, and he came up to me afterwards, and he said, I'm going to produce the show. And I was like, if you want me to. And I was like, uh-huh.
Yeah, I think, was it just him, or was Elaine May also involved at that point?
Elaine May also, yeah, the two of them. They presented it.
Wow. Do you have any memories of them? I mean, she's still alive, but do you have any anecdotes or funny stories or memories of either of them?
I think one of the craziest things is I did the show, when we did move it uptown to an off-Broadway theater, I remember doing the show as a run-through for them, and I came up to Mike afterwards and I said, so, do you have any notes? And he was like, the floor is a little shiny.
That's the best kind of note to get.
That was amazing. I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my God, really? That's it? And he's an amazing person. So smart, so generous, so kind, so complicated, but so brilliant, really. And he had a way of being able to talk about theater in a way that was both inspiring and challenging. He was a mentor of mine. He really was really incredibly helpful at a certain point in my career, and he continued to be. He was somebody that I went to and talked to, and he was very kind to me.
Now, speaking of people who've been in the business for a while and might be in mentorship positions, or just someone that you would look at and go, oh my gosh, I'm on the same stage with them. You did a Broadway show. I think maybe you're only one. You were in The Best Man when it was on Broadway with James Earl Jones and Angela Lansbury. So
I was.
Yeah, and
not only them, but like a whole cast of people like Candice Bergen and Eric McCormick from Will and Grace and Michael McKean, and it was like a star-studded cast. John Larroquette.
Right.
There were so many stars in that show. It was
well, do you have any anecdotes about any of them?
Well, an incredible thing happened when I was in that show.
Ooh.
I didn't have a star part. I had a decent part, but I was also understudying three of the star parts, and one of the stars that I was understudying was Michael McKean, from Spinal Tap.
Sure.
And he had an accident. He'd never missed a performance in his whole career, but he had an accident. Got hit by a taxi in New York City.
Now, what were you doing driving a taxi that day?
Tuesday afternoon, and there I was, and I went on for him, took over for him. I was on stage at 7 o'clock. It was really like one of those Broadway stories of like understudy steps into the role, and it was really the scariest thing I've ever done in my life.
Was that still in previews, or had the show already opened at that point?
No, the show was open. It was running. And
okay.
We were really going at it, and we were packing them in. So it was really, they couldn't miss a performance, and it was really, really exciting.
No, that first night that you went on in that role, in the Michael McKean role, was it all about hitting his spots, making sure he was into the light, and not throwing the other actors? And then maybe a week later you created your own performance?
It was more like not throwing up.
Fair enough.
Basically, I made two decisions. and one of them, on the way to the theater, once I got the call, I had been teaching that day, so I didn't really get the call until about 5 o'clock, and the curtain was at 7. So I was like, oh my God, I'm glad I didn't have that much time to think about it.
Mm.
But on my way to the theater, I just thought, okay, first of all, the first decision I made was that I was going to be good. I just thought, I'm just going to do this. You have to just make up your mind, because otherwise you'll just get overwhelmed. And I just thought, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to be really good. And then the second decision as I was getting closer to the theater, I just thought, there are 20 people in the company, right? There are 20 people in that cast.
Yeah.
And I just thought, I'm not going to have this be all about me. I'm going to make sure that everyone in this company feels at least not freaked out.
Yeah.
Because if I'm all freaked out and I go into that theater, and I'm like, oh my God, they're going to all freak out.
Yeah.
So, I went into the theater. I went up to John Larroquette's dressing room. I sat down with him. He asked me if I was ready. I told him I was. And then I went to the wardrobe. I got myself together. I went to Angela's dressing room so she could see me. So it wasn't like she saw me for the first time out on stage. I went to James Earl Jones' dressing room. I sort of made it not about me.
That's
these
cool.
are people who need to know what's going on, and they need to know that I'm going to be okay. So they're not worried, because if you have 20 people upset, that's different than just... I knew I was going to be nervous, but I just wanted to see if maybe I could allay people's fears a little bit. And it was really an exciting night, and you just white-knuckle it. You go out there and you hope you remember your lines. You just hope you know what entrance to make. And there are a lot of people helping.
Oh, are they? Oh, okay.
Yeah, there are people backstage going like, over here,
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Because I'm wondering how much rehearsal you would have gotten to do you're on stage every day watching, but how much rehearsal did you get?
It's such a different thing. It's when you actually take over a part and watching it. And fortunately, we had rehearsed the week before, as the understudies, we had all rehearsed. So I felt a little bit confident, but you never know until you step out there.
What happens at an understudy rehearsal? Okay. Are the main cast members there, or is everybody, the lead actors are not involved? It's just the understudies and then people with script in hand playing the main actors?
Yeah. All the understudies are there, and the stage manager, and you run the scene. So that you feel, at least you know what your marks are and the lines, and they know that you know the lines fairly well.
But they're pushing you towards the blocking. They're letting you know where to go at a certain point.
Yeah, because at that point it's like a little bit of a machine, right? Like you just have to fit in to the machine. And then, if in my case when I took over the role, as the nights go by, you make it more and more your own, and you settle in some way.
After a few nights had passed and you started to develop your own, you got comfortable. You now were in the role for a little while. How did you do that character differently than Michael McKean did?
Well, he's a totally different person, you know?
Yeah.
He's just a different person than I am. So, every actor you have to bring yourself. And who I am is so different from Michael McKean. We're just, I'm just in a different universe.
Sure.
So, it was interesting to find that character, because you didn't really have the time to explore it. You just get thrown into the center of things. You just got to find it however you can find it. That's when your craft as an actor, just really, you call upon it, because you just got to pull everything. You got to just draw from every experience you've ever had.
We're talking with James Lecesne about theater, because that's my main passion, but it's only fair to talk about the movie work that you've been doing, and really behind the lens. You did a documentary about Hurricane Katrina, or at least its aftermath. How did that come about?
Well, it's really because of theater.
There you go.
After Hurricane Katrina, I just kept hearing stories from people who came back from New Orleans talking about how the kids were really traumatized there. And there really weren't any services for them. Schools weren't really starting up. They were kind of lost. So I decided that I was going to go down there, and I had this idea of looking for a community theater or a community building or some sort of building where I could move into and do a production of a musical called Once on This Island.
Oh, yeah.
And You know that musical?
It's been about 25 years since I've seen it, but yeah, it was a Broadway...
Stephen Flaherty and Lynn Ahrens wrote a musical called Once on This Island about a mythological island in the Caribbean that gets hit by a hurricane. And it's really a beautiful musical about the value of telling your story and the value of community and how we survive as a community. So I thought it would be a really great thing to get a bunch of young people together and do a production of Once on This Island. So that was my initial idea, and I met this amazing filmmaker named Hila Medalia. She's an Israeli filmmaker, and she asked if she could come with me. So we got on a plane, we went down to New Orleans, I found a community center, and we cast a group of kids, about 12 of them. Over the course of rehearsing this play, we filmed their lives. None of them were living in their homes at the time. It's called After the Storm. And it was such a beautiful documentary about the value of art in a community and how art brought these kids back to life and drew them out of their traumatic experience and towards something that was generative and life-giving. And eventually we brought them and their families to New York. We did the show at Playwright Horizons, which was the original venue of Once on This Island. And that's also in the documentary film, which we didn't know we would do that. So it was really an amazing experience for me, and I think for everybody involved. Really reconnected us with what's really special about the theater and what it can do for not just a young person, but what it can do for a community.
Have you been in touch with any of the kids? Because you have that thing where you give them this whirlwind, wonderful experience, but then, like any artist, you're there and then you go away.
But, one of the things that happened was, as we were doing the show, once we got the show up down in New Orleans, I was obsessed for that very reason. I kept thinking, I just don't want to be a group of people who just swoop in, make these people's lives exciting, and then go away. Right? So the next leg of it was to bring them to New York, which was an incredible experience for them and their families, many of whom had never been outside of New Orleans. And then, of course, to watch their lives and be a part of their lives as they blossomed, basically. They all became just incredible young people doing incredible stuff, going to college. And
oh, wow.
Once you introduce a young person to this idea that they have some agency in the world, and it's one of the great things that theater can do. It can ignite this idea that you have some ability to make something happen. They all just made something happen in their lives. They all achieved something and went on to do incredible stuff. So the answer is yes, I'm still in touch with them.
Oh, cool. I'm also curious, was that project grant funded? I mean, how do you take all these people, bring them to New York on a theater budget? Is it enough to put up a play in New Orleans, let alone bring 30,
and make a documentary?
Yeah. Was it grant funded? So, how did you get the funding for
that? It's all people. I just raised the money.
Wow.
Hila took care of the money for the documentary film. We had some very generous producers on that end. Right. And then the New York theater community really helped. Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS put up a lot of money. But also individuals. We just went to people and asked. And I think it was at a time when people didn't really know how to help New Orleans. They just didn't know where to give their money. And what I was offering people in the theater community was not just a way to be able to help a group of young people, but a way to be able to create a link between the Broadway community and the New Orleans community. Hi, this is James Lecesne. Come see me at the Bay Street Theater. I'll be performing my solo show, The Absolute Brightness of Leonard Pelkey. I'm here talking with Dave Lefkowitz at Dave's Gone By at UNC Radio.
I'm going to ask James Lecesne also about you teach a storytelling and performing workshop. What can you teach in that? What do you tell students who come in over the course of that workshop that you do for a couple of days? How do you teach telling a story?
I teach people how to, it's not so much storytelling as it is, I teach people about story and structure. What is a story? How are stories structured, and what are the basic building blocks of story that people have been using since the beginning of storytelling, really. Whether you're writing a film or you're writing a book or a play or a children's book, it doesn't matter. Like, story is the basis for everything that we do, and especially in the arts. So basically what I do is I try to help people learn why we like stories and what makes a successful story.
Well, can you give me one example?
Of?
What makes a successful story? What would be something that you would make sure that your story had? If you had a student who was doing his or her own one-person show or writing a novella.
Well, I think that every story that we tell is a story about ourselves, right? Whether it's autobiographical or whether it's fictional.
Okay.
That it's connected to something that we deeply believe. So what I try to do is I try to get people connected more deeply to what they're passionate about and what they believe. That's really, you'd have to take the workshop.
Okay. Well, no, I'm saying like...
But basically what I do is I like to be able to excite people not by just coming up with a good idea, but coming up with an idea about something that they believe, and they really are going to go out there in the world, tell this story in order to change the world.
But also maybe an example, and obviously you can't use a name or anything, but of a student who came to you with the story that they wanted to tell, right? And they've got a draft, perhaps a first draft done. What's something that you told them? It's like, okay, you're here, now you need to do this to get here. Change this, or finesse this, or add this.
I don't really work that way.
Oh.
Like, I don't tell people what to do. Basically what I do is I teach them the basic building blocks of story, right?
Right.
And by understanding how to map out a story, they know what to do. I don't tell them what to do. Stories are universal. They're in our DNA. We all know how to listen to a story, and we all know whether a story is good or not. And there are reasons why we know they're good. We know they're good because they follow some pattern that we all recognize. So basically what I do is I just demystify it and teach people what that pattern is.
Well,
and it's up to them to be able to do the work.
Well, you saw a larger story in one of your characters, Trevor. Trevor came out of word of mouth.
It was just a tiny little piece that I performed about a 13-year-old boy named Trevor who, through a series of diary entries, he realized that he's gay, and he tries to kill himself, and he doesn't succeed. He lives another day. It's actually very funny and poignant, very touching story. When I did that show 20 years ago, two people, Pelkey and Randy Stone, two filmmakers, they came to me afterwards and asked me if I would adapt it into a screenplay, which I did, and we made Trevor. It's like a 16-minute film, short film, and that film, as you mentioned earlier in the program, that it
won the Oscar
Academy Award for Best Live Action Short that year.
Cool. So did you go to the Oscars?
I didn't, no, because I was actually performing.
What? You couldn't take the night off? Or the weekend, I guess.
Well,
yeah.
I wouldn't have been able to, in that category, the producers received the award, so I wouldn't have been able to go up on stage. And, I'm very serious about the theater. So I don't take nights off.
Whoa. Wow. Okay. I think that's great, although, I don't know. I would go to the Oscars once. Second time, I'd be like Woody Allen at, playing the clarinet or something. But the first time, I would go, I don't know. That's just me. We're talking with James Lecesne. Just a couple more minutes with him, and we thank him so much for being with us. I still want to roll it back a little bit more, even to childhood and your initial enchantment with the theater. Your first show, like I guess it is for a lot of kids, was Oliver in a little production. So how did that come about?
I was 15 years old. I got a job as an apprentice at a little summer stock theater on a little island off the coast of New Jersey called Long Beach Island.
Okay.
The first show that I was ever involved in was Oklahoma. I was moving scenery, and I thought, okay, so the lights go out and I go on stage? That can't be right. That just seems wrong.
Yeah.
And so I went to the guy who ran the theater, and I said, look, I'll do anything. I just want to be in the show. like, I'll do anything. And he was like, okay. So my job, I took care of all the kids. I was 15, but I was really given the job to take care of all the kids who were in Oliver, like all the, whatever they're called. And I got to be one of the kids.
Well, so you got to sort of corral them when they weren't on stage, and then on stage you were sort of the oldest orphan there.
Yeah, and because I was small for my age, I kind of could pass a little bit.
Yeah.
And that was the very first show I ever did.
So was it magical for you to be in front of the curtain? Or was it just more work? Because you were just one of the orphans.
It was more work, but it was so exciting.
It was exciting, okay.
And I knew it was what I was going to do. I just knew that that's what somehow I was going to make that my life. I didn't know how.
Did you do arts in college? What was your major stuff and all that?
I didn't go to college very long.
Wow.
I went for like a semester, and then I got a job, and then I started working.
What job?
Gosh, I mean, it was touring with a musical in a non-equity company. It was terrible.
Well, do you regret not?
Nope.
Oh, well, you've had a pretty damn good career in theater and the arts, so I guess there's no reason to regret.
When I was coming up in the business, there wasn't much room for somebody who was gay. It was not.
Really?
Really.
Huh.
Oh, gosh, yeah. And to be openly gay? Absolutely.
Even in the theater?
Not impossible. It was impossible.
Huh.
How old are you?
I'm 52, so you have about 9 years on me.
So those 9 years maybe are pivotal, but when I was coming up in the business, that was absolutely out of the question. Yeah, you could be gay, but you could not say you were gay, and you could not be open about it at all. It was a liability. And that just wasn't going to be possible for me. I just didn't believe in that. So it limited my employment opportunities, and it also limited the things I was interested in. I wasn't interested in just being, I wanted to be fully myself. And I also wanted to do things that mattered to me. And I felt like we were in the middle of a big change in society. Turns out I was right.
Well, yeah. Well, when did you become an activist?
Right. And it also led to my being able to find my life's mission, which was to write the piece of, to write the film, Trevor, and then also to be one of the co-founders of the Trevor Project, which is a 24-hour suicide prevention and crisis intervention lifeline for LGBT and questioning young people in this country. We've been at it for 18 years. You probably know the statistics. LGBT young people are 3 to 4 times more likely to attempt suicide than their heterosexual peers, and that just seems wrong. And so the Trevor Project's been there for 18 years, really saving their lives. And that, to me, is like the greatest accomplishment of my life. And that came out of my commitment and my belief that art and theater and film can be used to create social change.
Were you in and around New York or California during the 80s and the AIDS years?
Yeah, and that was really what impacted me so deeply, was the fact that when I learned about the statistics of gay teen suicide was also during the period that I was living through a plague. So there's one generation that was basically dying off, and then there was this other generation that was killing themselves. And I just thought, this is crazy. This got to stop. And, I didn't really know what to do about the AIDS epidemic except to take care of the people in my life who were dying. But I became crazy committed to the idea of doing something about young people who were trying to kill themselves and trying to change that story and let them know that their lives were valuable in some way.
Talking with James Lecesne, it's gotten so heavy, man. But talking about art and real life and activism. So
all very heavy subjects.
Well, yeah. So what are you working on now? I mean, you're doing Leonard Pelkey, but obviously you're always going to be working on other pieces, or are you going to appearing in stuff? What?
In this show, we'll travel around the country for the next year or so. So I'm doing it at the Bay Street in July. But then, I go and I do it to other places like the Old Globe Theater in San Diego and Hartford Stage and West Palm Beach, and different places around the country. But I'm also, I also write books for young adults.
Oh, okay.
I'm working on a new book, sort of in the early stages of it, but it'll come out next year. And working on a play that I hope to get done here in New York in the next year.
Mm.
So,
Is that play finished? Can you talk about it or not yet?
It's a play I've written. Well, what can I say about it? It sort of deals with the topic of Alzheimer's.
Oh.
And a family facing their conflicting memories of what happened in the family. Let's put it that way.
Did you see The Father on Broadway?
I did. Amazing performance by Frank Langella. Incredible.
I haven't seen it, but I've heard it's really good. And it takes a fractal look of the world through his eyes, as opposed to the family's eyes of a man who is suffering increasing dementia. So I'm just wondering if I'd seen it.
My play's funny.
Right.
I like to take things like suicide and Alzheimer's, and I like people to laugh. Cry too, but I like to make people laugh. What can I say?
Well, it's been fun laughing and getting serious with James Lecesne. I haven't asked you, and it's hard to find this online anywhere, but your personal life. Do you have a person in your life? Are you married to someone? Anything like that?
I'm not married.
Okay. Are you partnered with somebody?
No.
Okay. Particular reason? Because you're around all the time, or you're not looking, or you are looking, or you're dating, or what's your situation?
There's no reason.
Okay. Cool. All right. Yeah,
My life.
People are curious about personal lives, and some people are more solo than others.
I have a very rich and full life.
Well, yeah. Art.
And I'm really, really happy. And I work hard on myself, and I work hard on the world, and I do my best to create value wherever I go. How's that?
Create value wherever you go. That's actually a great line. And the line that we will leave James Lecesne with. And if you want to see and hear James Lecesne live and in person, adding value to the theater, you got to go to the Bay Street Theater in East Hampton to see The Absolute Brightness of Leonard Pelkey, and it's playing from July 18th through July 24th only, but also you want to check his website, jameslescene.com, to see where else he'll be doing it across the country. And it's James, Lecesne, jameslescene.com. We thank you so much for being with us in the neighborhood. We wish you further success with Leonard Pelkey and the other valuable things that you're doing creatively and actively in the world. Thank you so much, man.
Thanks so much, Dave. Thanks for having me on the program. It's been really fun.
Likewise. Thanks, man. Bye-bye.
Bye.